December 14th, 2025 was the day that both the Reyes and DeJuan families had been waiting for through all those years, the most important day in the lives of two young people. The groom, Mark Reyes, a 31-year-old senior IT engineer working at one of Manila's leading technology corporations, was set to marry Shara DeJuan, a 30-year-old accountant who had been his girlfriend for 10 years. However, instead of thunderous applause and joyful laughter echoing beneath the cathedral's vaulted ceiling, what appeared before everyone's eyes were the glaring yellow caution tape of the Quezon City Police Department stretched across the entrance, and a team of investigators with stern, cold expressions scribbling notes in a frenzy. Across every social media platform in the Philippines, from Facebook to Twitter, urgent missing person notices bearing the beautiful bride's photograph spread with dizzying speed. "Whether the wedding happens or not doesn't matter anymore. I just need her to come back safe." Those were the broken, choked words that groom Mark Reyes uttered before dozens of camera lenses and microphones pointed straight at him. His voice trembled so badly it was barely recognizable. December 10th, 4 days before the tragedy, was also 4 days before the most important day of Shara's life. According to detailed statements from family members, close friends, and neighbors living in the area, that morning Shara's mental state appeared completely normal. One might even say she was immersed in a state of absolute excitement, brimming with energy and the eager anticipation of someone about to become a bride. Around 1 p.m., a package was delivered to the DeJuan residence. It was the custom-made wedding dress Shara had ordered. According to family members present at the time, when Shara opened the package and saw the pristine white gown, her eyes sparkled with light. She eagerly took the dress to her bedroom to try it on. Minutes later, she emerged and stood before the full-length mirror in the living room. In the mirror, her slender figure was perfectly accentuated by the dress, which hugged her waist flawlessly. She turned this way and that before the mirror, examining every fold of the train, a smile rising from the depths of her heart. However, while trying on the dress, Shara's keen eye caught a small flaw that left her somewhat troubled. Her current shoes, though still new, didn't quite harmonize with the length of the wedding dress train. Standing before the mirror, she felt the overall look hadn't achieved the perfection she had long hoped for on this most important day of her life. After a few minutes of deliberation, Shara concluded that she needed a new pair of wedding shoes with a more suitable height to flatter her figure and allow the train to fall properly. She gently told her family that she would be going out to buy a pair of shoes, a decision that sounded completely ordinary. Her destination was Fairview Central Mall, known locally simply as FCM. The mall was located in the North Fairview district, only a few miles from Shara's home, a distance so short it required no second thought. For Shara, who had lived in this area for many years, FCM was more than just a familiar shopping center. Under normal circumstances, catching a jeepney or tricycle would take just over 10 minutes. Quick, simple, and safe. After confirming her route, Shara picked up her phone. At 1:18 p.m., she sent a brief message to her fiancé Mark, who was busy at work, informing him that she was heading to FCM to buy shoes. On the other end, Mark received the message amid his overwhelming workload. In his mind, this was merely a tiny detail among the countless tasks that needed completing before the wedding. He replied with a familiar emoji, then quickly returned to his computer screen, the lines of code, and the back-to-back meetings. Mark had no way of knowing that this seemingly trivial message was the last one Shara would ever send, and that it would later become a crucial piece of evidence that police would reference repeatedly throughout their investigation. After sending that message, Shara did something highly unusual in modern society. She left her phone at home. An action that seemed trivial at first would later prove to be a decisive detail in the entire case. According to the police scene investigation report, Shara's phone was found charging in the bedroom, placed neatly beside the bed. The screen was completely dark with no notifications or missed calls, but the charging indicator light was on, showing the device was charging normally. Besides the phone, the laptop Shara frequently used was also placed tidily on her desk, powered off. This detail initially puzzled the police. However, during subsequent questioning, Daryl, Shara's older brother, provided an important explanation that helped shed light on his sister's daily habits. Daryl recalled, "My sister wasn't going out without her phone for the first time. If she was just going somewhere very close to home, like the convenience store or a shopping center in the area, maybe a 5 to 10-minute trip, she often had a habit of leaving her phone at home. He added another noteworthy detail. In the past, Shara had lost her phone twice while carrying it out, incidents that made her more cautious in her daily routine. Therefore, Daryl believed that perhaps for safety reasons, or simply to avoid repeating those unpleasant experiences, Shara had decided to leave her phone at home charging, trusting that she would only be gone for a very short time before returning. From a logical standpoint, this explanation was entirely reasonable and consistent with the habits of someone who had lived in a familiar area for many years. However, in reality, this seemingly harmless decision led to catastrophic consequences. Not having her phone meant police couldn't locate Shara through cell tower signals, nor could they trace any GPS data or movement history. No call logs, no last known location, no technical leads to follow. In that single moment of leaving home without her communication device, Shara had inadvertently severed her only connection to the digital world, pushing herself into a state of near absolute disappearance, a void that neither family nor investigators could fill in the days that followed. Shara quickly changed out of her house clothes, putting on a black hooded jacket, black pants, and white sneakers. Before leaving, she grabbed a personal water bottle and a small black wallet. Around 1:30 p.m., Shara stepped out the front door, locked it behind her, and walked toward Fairview Central Mall. No one in the family could have imagined at that moment that this image would be the last time they would see Shara in a completely normal state. Time passed, and before anyone knew it, night had fallen. Mark got off work and, as usual, picked up his phone to check for messages, but there were no new notifications from Shara. At first, he wasn't too worried, but a sense of unease gradually crept in. Common sense dictated that buying a pair of shoes couldn't possibly take an entire afternoon into the evening, especially when Shara had only gone to FCM, a shopping center both of them knew extremely well. Mark began calling Shara repeatedly. The phone rang, the signal connected, but the other end remained completely silent with no one answering. The calls stretched on in futility. It wasn't until later, when he spoke with Shara's family, that he learned her phone had been ringing in the bedroom the whole time. 11 p.m. More than 10 hours had passed since Shara left home. FCM had long since closed, the surrounding streets had sunk into silence, and pedestrians were so sparse you could count them on your fingers. This was clearly no longer a case of coming home late. This was complete loss of contact. Shara's family could no longer wait in anxiety. They decided to post the first missing person notice on Facebook, clinging to the faint hope that someone out there had seen her, or could at least provide some small clue. Immediately, Mark shared the post while frantically reaching out to every friend and acquaintance, anyone who might know where Shara had gone or what had happened to her. In the dead of night, news of a bride-to-be suddenly vanishing just days before her wedding spread rapidly through the Philippine online community. Shares increased by the minute, and worried, confused comments appeared in droves. Public attention began pouring onto the name Shara, a woman who should have been busy preparing for her wedding day, now at the center of a mysterious disappearance that left society stunned. December 11th. What should have been the final rehearsal day for the wedding. But the time slot reserved at the church sat empty in silence. No bride, no ceremony, no explanation. Shara remained completely without a trace, as if she had vanished from everyone's lives. Given the circumstances, the family had no choice but to file an official report, and the case was opened for police investigation. Immediately upon receiving the case file, the Quezon City Police Department, QCPD, recognized this was no ordinary missing persons case. The victim was an adult woman with no history of running away from home, who had disappeared right before her wedding. A sensitive time both psychologically and socially. Recognizing the severity, QCPD immediately formed a special investigation task force led by experienced detectives with the goal of treating the case as a high priority. The task force's primary mission was to reconstruct Shara's entire journey after leaving home using all available technical means. Police proceeded to extract footage from every public and private security camera within a 3-mile radius of Shara's residence. A massive amount of data, including cameras from private homes, shops, gas stations, intersections, and major roads. After 2 days and nights of continuous screening, each blurry frame and scattered video clip was pieced together. Gradually, a relatively complete movement route began to emerge. On the afternoon of December 10th, around 1 p.m., a security camera positioned at the head of the alley near Shara's home captured clear and significant footage. In the frame, Shara appeared wearing a black jacket, black pants, and conspicuous white sneakers that made her easy to identify. Her left hand held a water bottle, while her right hand gripped a small wallet, exactly matching what her family had described. Shara's gait was completely normal, not rushed, not flustered, showing no signs of fear. She didn't look back over her shoulder, didn't appear vigilant or worried, and most importantly, showed no signs of being followed. Every detail in the footage indicated this was an entirely natural, routine outing. These images confirmed Shara's family's statements. She had indeed left home according to plan to go shopping, carrying only the minimum necessary items. There was no indication that Shara was preparing for a long trip, let alone showing signs of running away from home. At 1:30 p.m., a security camera at the corner of Atherton Street captured Shara's image again. This was the mandatory route to get from the residential area to the main road, showing she was moving along her familiar path. By 1:45 p.m., in footage from a camera near a Petron gas station, Shara still appeared with unchanged clothing and identifying features, walking forward with determination. Her direction at this point was very clear, straight toward the main road where public transportation routes converged. Subsequent video clips showed Shara passing by a fast food restaurant and the area near a bus stop. At this point, her pace was somewhat faster than before, no longer as leisurely as when she left home, leading investigators to speculate she might have been hurrying to catch a ride. Though each image was just a scattered fragment, when placed together in chronological sequence, they connected into a continuous route. Together, they sketched out Shara's final clear, purposeful, and completely lucid walking path before she suddenly lost contact. At Commonwealth Avenue, the leads began to grow murky and harder to grasp. This was the widest avenue and the busiest traffic corridor in Quezon City, where thousands of vehicles and people passed through daily. This very characteristic made Commonwealth both a vital artery and a place that had swallowed traces in numerous previous cases. After an expanded search, police obtained another surveillance video, also recorded on the afternoon of December 10th in the Commonwealth Avenue area. In the frame appeared a figure whose build, height, and clothing characteristics closely matched Shara, black jacket, black pants, and white sneakers standing out among the crowd. This person was moving toward a crowded bus stop where many passengers waited for public transportation. However, the image quality here was noticeably worse than cameras in the residential area. In one very distant and extremely blurry segment, that figure appeared to board a public transportation vehicle stopped at the roadside. Due to the distance, limited camera angle, and the overwhelming density of people passing by, the camera couldn't clearly capture the license plate, vehicle type, or route number of whatever this person boarded. And it was at this hazy moment that the investigation officially veered in a different direction. This was the first major branching point of the entire case, where all hypotheses began splitting into completely different paths. What vehicle did Shara actually get into? Initially, police leaned toward the hypothesis that the vehicle appearing in that blurry footage was a bus. If Shara had indeed left the area by public bus, her range of movement would immediately expand significantly. From Commonwealth Avenue, a bus could head north toward Bulacan Province or south into downtown Manila. Two completely different directions that would entail far more complex and costly investigation scenarios. However, in a subsequent press conference, the Quezon City Police Department was forced to frankly acknowledge their technical limitations. A police representative stated, "The footage was captured from too great a distance, and the resolution is very low. We cannot absolutely confirm that the person boarding that vehicle was Shara. At the same time, we cannot identify the vehicle's license plate, type, or route number." This admission meant that the most crucial lead at Commonwealth Avenue could not be verified. The bus hypothesis, though plausible, remained merely speculation. The investigation was thus stuck at the crossroads of possibilities, where each direction that opened up was vast, vague, and full of risk for error. Subsequently, investigators attempted to cross-reference the time frame to screen all bus routes that had passed through the stop on Commonwealth Avenue during the time Shara was believed to have appeared. However, this investigative approach was nearly like searching for a needle in a haystack. The number of vehicles passing through during rush hour was enormous, while the suspected vehicle wasn't equipped with interior or exterior camera systems capable of data connectivity, making tracing extremely difficult. Not only that, but surveillance cameras along the route couldn't provide much more help either. Due to limited angles, long distances, and excessive pedestrian traffic, these systems couldn't capture clear images of passengers boarding or exiting vehicles. No license plate, no route number, no definitive moment confirming which vehicle Shara had boarded. Ultimately, the crucial lead at Commonwealth Avenue reached a dead end, unable to be deepened or expanded further. Meanwhile, Shara's family and her fiancé Mark refused to simply sit and wait. Not wanting to leave fate to the slow progress of technical investigation, they actively searched in their own way. The first destination that came to mind was Fairview Central Mall, FCM, where Shara had said she would go to buy wedding shoes. They held on to a slender but practical hope. With the high-resolution camera system densely installed throughout the shopping center, there would surely be footage capturing Shara entering and exiting, or at least confirming whether she had actually set foot in FCM or not. When Shara's family approached Fairview Central Mall's management and requested to review the security camera system, they received an answer that struck like a bolt from the blue. "We're very sorry, but the surveillance camera system at the entrances and exits is currently undergoing upgrades and maintenance. Specifically for December 10th, no video data whatsoever was stored." This information immediately became a fatal gap in the entire investigation chain. It meant no one could confirm whether Shara had actually stepped foot inside the shopping center. A lead that could have clarified all doubts had ultimately vanished on the most critical day. Nevertheless, there were still a few sales staff inside the center who, after being shown photos, thought they might have seen a woman resembling Shara. There were even social media posts from netizens claiming to have spotted a woman wearing similar clothing and glasses at Alley Mall in a different area. However, all these subjective testimonies shared one common problem. They were vague, inconsistent, and completely lacking verified evidence. No images, no specific times, no clear identification. Therefore, while offering some hope to the family, this information wasn't reliable enough for police to act upon. Police didn't abandon other possibilities. Considering the hypothesis that Shara might have returned to her hometown seeking refuge or temporarily left her current life to escape psychological pressure, investigators expanded their search beyond Quezon City. Liaison officers were dispatched to Romblon Province, Shara's ancestral home, to conduct direct verification. There, local police cooperated and assisted, checking relatives' homes, questioning family members, even searching some familiar places Shara had frequented in the past. However, the results were entirely disappointing. There was no trace indicating Shara had returned home. Simultaneously, the Bureau of Immigration's database was extracted and thoroughly reviewed. If Shara had left the Philippines, there would certainly be an administrative trace. But results showed no departure record existed under the name Shara de Juan, meaning she had never left the country through legal channels. When all official investigative directions reached dead ends with no clear technical leads to follow, public attention gradually shifted. From focusing on finding Shara, public opinion began turning toward finding a perpetrator. Under the amplification of social media algorithms, baseless theories, emotional speculation, and conspiracy theories began rising in a frenzy, spreading faster than any official information. The atmosphere of searching was gradually replaced by judgment, suspicion, and rumor, pushing Shara's disappearance case into an entirely different phase. On December 16th, 2 days after the wedding was supposed to have taken place, the Quezon City Police Department officially announced that Mark, Shara's fiancé, was being listed as a person of interest in the investigation file. From a legal procedure standpoint, this move did not mean Mark was a suspect. In their announcement and media interactions, police repeatedly emphasized this was merely a standard procedural step in adult missing persons cases. The reasoning was clear. Mark was the last person to have direct contact with Shara before she disappeared, And simultaneously, as her fiancé, he was the person who most completely possessed knowledge of Shara's social relationships, daily habits, personal schedules, and private life details. However, in the court of online public opinion, the phrase person of interest was almost immediately equated with the word perpetrator. In a short time, Mark was pushed straight onto the public's judgment seat, where no evidence was needed, no legal process required, only suspicion and collective imagination. On social media, every action and expression from Mark was scrutinized to an extreme degree. Netizens dissected every micro-expression on his face, every blink, every hand movement whenever he appeared before media cameras. Fatigue, confusion, or grief, which could be natural reactions from someone desperately searching for a loved one, were instead interpreted as signs of concealment in many people's eyes. Quite a few opinions targeted the last message Shara sent to Mark. "Shara normally doesn't use capital letters," one post claimed, "so why did that message have capitals? Could someone have forged the message?" Small details that could have appeared entirely randomly suddenly became inferential evidence in a collectively woven narrative. Some people even claimed to possess inside information, asserting that Shara and Mark had previously argued, thereby constructing a complete scenario. This was a crime of passion, meticulously disguised as a disappearance. Without verification, without source cross-checking, these assertions still spread at dizzying speed, shared, commented on, and inflated through each cycle of social media algorithms. Facing the relentless wave of accusations and cyber violence pouring in from all directions, Mark didn't choose to hide. On the contrary, he chose the path of absolute cooperation with investigators, as the only way to prove his innocence, and above all, to find Shara. Mark voluntarily handed over all personal devices to police, including Shara's phone that had been left at home and his own phone, to facilitate digital forensics and data analysis. Without hesitation, without conditions attached, he was willing to have every piece of his private information placed under investigators' microscope. He also accepted a grueling 7-hour interrogation, during which police continuously questioned him about the relationship between them, their financial situation, any conflicts that might have existed, as well as every large and small detail throughout their 10 years together. Every memory, every timeline, every past decision was required to be clarified, nothing omitted. In a brief press meeting, amid the glare of camera lights and scrutinizing lenses, Mark spoke in a tired but resolute voice. "I'm not afraid of being investigated. As long as she can be found, you can check everything about me. I don't need to protect myself. I just hope she's still alive." Alongside the conspiracy theories targeting Mark, online public opinion gradually formed another thread of speculation, this time directed squarely at Shara herself. This theory was quickly pushed to a climax after the sworn testimony of bridesmaid Jackie Luo was leaked and spread widely across social media. That testimony not only revealed a potential motive behind Shara's disappearance, but also cruelly tore away the veneer of happiness from a family that had been perceived as harmonious and complete. Behind the wedding photos, the congratulatory wishes, and the radiant smiles lay a quiet financial wound that very few outsiders had ever known about. According to Jackie, before her disappearance, Shara was drowning in serious financial difficulties. The greatest pressure came from Shara's father, Mr. Jose de Juan, who was severely ill and required long-term medical care. This wasn't a short-term or temporary expense, but rather an enormous ongoing cost capable of eroding even families with stable financial foundations. Previously, Mark had publicly reassured the public that thanks to the health insurance his company provided, covering medical expenses for his future father-in-law wouldn't be a major issue. However, according to the bridesmaid's revelation, reality was far harsher. The insurance limit under Shara's name had already reached its maximum cap, meaning it could no longer cover the expensive treatments ahead. Not only medical expenses, but wedding preparations, though shared between both families, were still no small sum for families without surplus. The wedding dress, the reception, the ceremonies, the dowry gifts, details that seemed trivial individually when added together, became a terrifying figure. Not to mention the mortgage payments on their future home, daily living expenses, and ongoing medication costs for her seriously ill father. All these very real, very tangible pressures piled on top of each other, weighing like a mountain on the shoulders of a woman standing at the threshold of marriage. In this context, a seemingly passing remark from Shara became piercingly significant. "I want to quit my job," she had told Mark not long before her disappearance. This wasn't merely an ordinary complaint. It was a sign of utter exhaustion, of a person gradually running out of energy in the face of work, responsibilities, and her current life. That anxiety became even clearer through confirmation from Shara's mother. Through tears, she recounted that just one day before her daughter vanished on December 9th, Shara had spoken to her in an unusually frail voice. "Mom, I'm finding it very hard to think." Gradually, the image of a woman crushed by financial pressure, confused about marriage, and subconsciously yearning to escape began to emerge more clearly in the public's eyes. This picture seemed to explain many details that had appeared puzzling. Why Shara didn't bring her phone, why she only carried minimal belongings when leaving home. Perhaps at first, she just wanted to step outside for some air, to find a moment of quiet for herself amid those suffocating days. But under the relentless pressure of reality, each step pushed her further than intended, until she could no longer turn back. In their desperation, when all search efforts had reached dead ends, Shara's family even sought out a famous Filipino psychic as a final spiritual lifeline. Through tarot readings and sensing sessions, the psychic predicted that Shara was still alive, that she had never left Luzon Island, and that her current location was somewhere in the north, possibly Pangasinan or Baguio. According to the psychic, Shara had chosen to leave on her own because feelings of pressure and confusion had exceeded her capacity to endure. Of course, these conclusions had no scientific basis and couldn't be used as investigative grounds. Yet in circumstances where there were no longer any leads to cling to, they inadvertently kindled a fragile flame of hope for the family. By this point, nearly 2 weeks had passed since Shara's disappearance. The prolonged time in hopelessness left family and loved ones increasingly exhausted, both mentally and physically. With the faint hope that some clue might still exist out there, the family decided to raise the reward money from its initial amount to 150,000 pesos, equivalent to approximately $2,500. December 29th, 2025. Monday. Just when many believed this case was about to become the unsolved case of the year, fate's wheels suddenly turned. But this time, it didn't turn in familiar Quezon City. It turned in the north, nearly 125 miles from where Shara had vanished. That afternoon, Mark was at home, quietly sorting through missing person posters that had grown crumpled from rain, sun, and time. Suddenly, the phone on his desk vibrated violently, shattering the silence that had stretched on for so many days. Mark looked down at the screen. A completely unfamiliar phone number appeared, the area code indicating the call came from a northern province. His heart suddenly tightened. He hesitated for a few brief seconds before finally answering. The moment the connection was established, a choked voice came through from the other end amid sobs. Just hearing that sound, Mark recognized it immediately. It was Shara. She said she was borrowing the phone of a motorcycle taxi driver named Rodel to make the call. That brief call after 19 days of disappearance became the moment that turned the entire fate of the case. Rodel was just an ordinary resident living in the town of Sison, Pangasinan province. That day, he was riding his motorcycle along a bypass road called Bypass Road to go to work as usual. This was a sparsely traveled road, mainly serving vehicles, not suitable for pedestrians. On both sides stretched farmland and barren lots, creating a feeling of isolation and emptiness. According to Rodel's detailed statement to police afterward, while traveling, he noticed a woman walking alone along the roadside. This image immediately caught his attention, because in this area there were almost never pedestrians, especially not a woman alone. That woman was Shara, and her condition at that moment was deeply alarming. Her black clothing was covered in dust and grime, her white sneakers had turned grayish-brown. Her hair was disheveled, her face gaunt, and her eyes distant and unfocused, as though she hadn't rested or interacted with anyone for many days. In that moment, Shara looked like a lost child, completely exhausted and helpless in the middle of that desolate space. As Rodell passed by, Shara suddenly flagged him down. She burst into tears, her voice trembling, begging him for help. At that moment, Rodell was wearing earphones and listening to music, so initially he had no idea that the disheveled, exhausted woman standing before him was the missing bride who had been making national headlines for so many days. It wasn't until Shara haltingly recounted that she came from Quezon City, that she had originally just gone out to buy wedding shoes, that in a few days it was supposed to be her wedding, and that her fiancé's name was Mark Reyes, that Rodell was stunned. Immediately, he took out his phone and searched that name. In an instant, the screen filled with articles, missing person notices, and images of the missing bride. The woman in those photos looked fresh, neat, and radiant, completely opposite to the haggard, grimy person standing before him. Yet the facial features, eyes, and identifying characteristics matched undeniably. Faced with this truth, Rodell had no more doubts. He also clearly recognized that her body was extremely weak, her mind panicked and unstable, obviously unable to immediately endure a long journey, let alone face a tense police interrogation. As a simple, kind-hearted local, Rodell decided to first bring her to his nearby home so she could rest, eat, and drink, and regain some strength before contacting family and authorities. Rodell's wife welcomed Shara warmly and with great compassion. Seeing the exhausted state of this strange young woman, she almost immediately understood that something very serious had happened. Shara was brought inside, bathed, changed into clean clothes, and given some food and water. After a short rest, when Shara's emotions had somewhat stabilized, Rodell handed her his phone and helped her call Mark's number. The moment the call connected, two people who had been separated for 19 days were finally reunited through the phone signal. Immediately after the confirming call was made, District 5 of the Quezon City Police Department sprang into action. A convoy consisting of police, Shara's family members, and Mark quickly departed, racing toward Pangasinan Province, nearly 125 miles away. When the convoy arrived at Sison Town Police Station, night had fully fallen. Shara had already been brought to the station to wait in safe conditions. The moment Mark saw Shara, all the online rumors, all the suspicions and judgments of so many days instantly evaporated. Shara had lost over 20 pounds, her cheekbones protruding, her skin pale as paper, looking vastly different from the radiant bride in those wedding photos from before. The moment she saw Mark, Shara could no longer hold herself together. She broke down sobbing, her entire body collapsing onto the chair as if every last bit of strength had been drained. The first words that escaped her lips were, "I'm sorry. Sorry for missing the wedding. Sorry for making everyone worried and suffer." Mark held her tight, whispering over and over, his voice trembling but resolute. "Don't think about the wedding anymore. As long as you're back, that's enough. We don't care about any of that." At 1 a.m. on December 30th, the convoy escorting Shara officially left Pangasinan, bringing her back to her familiar home in Quezon City. After the long nighttime journey, the family only wished for her to rest immediately, making up for nearly 3 weeks of exhaustion in both body and spirit. However, following mandatory procedures, police still had to conduct an initial medical evaluation to rule out the possibility that Shara had been sexually assaulted or subjected to physical violence during her time missing. After doctors conducted a preliminary examination, the results brought some relief while also being heartbreakingly painful. No signs of injury were found on Shara's body. However, Shara's overall health condition was at an alarming level. She was severely malnourished, heavily dehydrated, with physiological indicators all below safe levels. Doctors diagnosed Shara with severe peptic ulcer disease, the result of prolonged fasting under harsh conditions. According to Shara's own account, throughout the 19 days of disappearance, she had eaten almost no solid food, surviving only on water she found by the roadside or small amounts that kind strangers occasionally gave her. Her stomach had consequently shrunk and was no longer capable of immediately digesting normal meals. What actually happened during those 19 days? When Shara's mental state gradually became more stable, police began taking her statement, trying to piece together the truth from fragmented, scattered, and illogical memories she could recall. But the deeper they delved into her account, the more investigators realized that what Shara recounted was filled with contradictions, making the overall picture of the case not clearer, but instead shrouded in an additional layer of inexplicable mystery. According to Shara's hazy memory, on December 10th, after arriving at Fairview Central Mall, she couldn't find shoes she liked. Not wanting to return empty-handed, she decided to go a bit further to Evergotesco Shopping Center. To get there, Shara said she flagged down a vehicle by the roadside that looked like a UV Express service, a type of shared passenger van very common in the Philippines, typically without signage or fixed routes. On the vehicle, besides the driver, there were 2 male passengers she didn't know. But what happened next? Even Shara herself couldn't answer clearly. Her memory suddenly showed a large gap. She only remembered falling asleep on the vehicle, or perhaps losing consciousness. The feeling between sleep and unconsciousness blurred together, impossible to distinguish. When Shara woke up or gradually regained awareness, she found herself in Pangasinan, a place nearly 125 miles from Quezon City. She had no idea how she had gotten there. The time in between seemed to have been stolen from her memory. During her days wandering in Pangasinan, Shara recounted to police and family in a hollow voice, as though she herself found it hard to comprehend what she had been through. "I just walked, kept walking." That was how she described that period. No plan, no destination, just footsteps following one after another unconsciously. Shara said she usually walked at dawn, when the air was still cool and the roads were empty, because she felt safer then. During the day, when the sun was harsh and crowds began appearing, she would find tree shade, abandoned shacks, or underneath bridges to shelter temporarily, avoiding the sun while also avoiding people's gazes. In those scattered memories, Shara remembered seeing buses with Cubao signs passing by. Believing Cubao was the path home, she tried to follow the direction of the buses, nurturing a fragile hope that if she walked long enough, one day she would make it back to Quezon City. But reality was far crueler. With no money, no phone, and an introverted, timid personality, Shara didn't dare ask passers-by for help, though inside she had been desperate many times over. She simply endured in silence, letting hunger, thirst, and exhaustion gradually erode her body. It was only when her strength was completely depleted, when her legs could no longer take another step, and her will had nearly collapsed, that Shara desperately flagged down Rodel on that empty road. In January 2026, after Shara safely returned, police officially declared the missing persons investigation essentially closed. Though many questions remained that couldn't be fully explained, the law demands concrete evidence, not feelings or speculation. In the final briefing, the police spokesperson emphasized, "Unless Shara, after fully recovering her memory, can provide new and verified details indicating this was a criminal act, we will respect the family's wishes and not pursue the case excessively." And so, the missing bride case closed on the investigation paperwork. But the unanswered questions remained quietly behind, in the memories of those involved and in the public's lingering uncertainty. Whether this case holds any mystery depends on whether Shara's memory will recover. What do you think about this case? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you for watching and see you in our next video.